Hello and welcome to this video about Red Hat Lightspeed cost management. My name is Pau Garcia. I'm the product manager for this product, and I'm going to talk to you today about our cost model capabilities. Cost models are one of the advanced features in cost management, one that few tools in this space have. Cost management supports cloud costs for Azure, AWS, GCP, and also for OpenShift running on-premise or on the cloud, OpenShift virtualization running on-premise on the cloud, RHEL, or any other guest operating system running on the cloud or on OpenShift virtualization. We import tags, labels, organizational units, cost categories, and many more things from the clouds and from OpenShift, bring that in cost management, and then we do our default cost distribution, which is based on the effective CPU usage, and then we add the cost of storage, networking, and all of that, right? But then there's other costs that you might want to reflect, for instance, the cost of the control plane or standing costs in operating your platform. And how do you do that? Or what if you're using OpenShift on-premise? There's no cloud bill to read from in that case, right? But you still want to reflect your actual cost of running your application, which is containers, virtual machines, but also cloud services, and also external costs like cost of operation, cost of subscriptions, third-party licenses. There's the cost of the IT department itself. You can represent all of that with a cost model. The cost model concept in cost management is very simple. It's a price list plus a cost distribution strategy plus a markup. We have more than 40 cost dimensions available to define a price list. The CPU, memory, storage, node, cluster, VM, PVC, GPU, many more things. And then for each dimension, you can choose different metering strategies. And then you can choose what to distribute. And then you can also add additional costs on top of that. The way that we calculate costs in cost management is the right way. We look at where each spot is running at each moment in time, how much that node was costing at that moment in time, be it a cloud node or an on-premise node, and then we distribute that. On top of that, you can choose to distribute the cost of the control plane, platform projects like cross services, unallocated capacity, unallocated storage, networking cost, unused GPU. All of those things are the total cost to distribute it, which is always the cloud cost and the price list cost. Let's see an example, a real-world example. The first thing that you will need to do is talk to your finance people. You need to say, this is the cost of my cluster or my clusters or my IT department, and how am I amortizing that, for instance? And what are my cost of operations? And what do I want to do with my overhead costs? Because an overhead cost could be the cost of the IT department itself, or it could be the wasted capacity in the clusters, which could, maybe it's not wasted. Maybe it's just waiting there for future growth. Maybe it's waiting for disaster recovery. All those things you can do with cost management. And then the other thing that you need to know is, do I want to calculate costs? Do I want to calculate metering, how much I used of each thing, of each dimension? Do I want both of them? In cost management, you will get both of them. Let's see this real world example. Let's say they have 2 clusters per rack in my data center. With each rack has a top of the rack switch and a PDU. And then each one of the 2 clusters is 3 control plane nodes, 2 infra nodes, and 15 worker nodes. I'm going to say that for the purpose of this example, all the nodes, be it control plane or worker plane, is 32 cores per node. And all of them have network cards, and they have out-of-band remote access like ELO from HP or DRAC from Dell or others. In some nodes, they have GPU, like NVIDIA A100, for instance. And my storage, I have node attached storage for booting the operating system, maybe. And then I have SAN storage, like the mass storage, right? All of my clusters are going to run OpenShift. And when I say OpenShift, that's OpenShift, OpenShift AI, OpenShift virtualization, OpenStack on OpenShift, doesn't matter. Cost management can do it all. And then I'm going to say that my operation is outsourced and my IT partner is charging me a price per node. And for my internal customers or external customers, doesn't matter, I'm charging them different prices for different SLAs on top of what they are paying for the consumption. In this case, with this real world example, I will translate this into this. I have talked to my finance people and I have calculated that my cluster cost is going to be $10,000 per month for the rack space, for the top of the switch rack, for the electricity, for the remote access and other things. Then I'm going to say that I have 8 cents per effective CPU core hour. I have decided I'm going to charge based on the effective with CPU, which is the graded between the usage and the request. And then I have A100 GPUs, which I have calculated for the actual price that they sell these days, and calculating a 3-year amortization, I'm going to say that it's around $500 per month. Then storage cost, I'm going to charge based on the requested capacity, not on the used capacity, but the requested one. I'm going to add the cost of the OpenShift subscription. Then there's a cost of operation. I'm going to say that I'm running OpenShift virtualization VMs with Windows or RHEL. RHEL is free when I'm running this on bare metal, but for Windows I have to pay the subscription, which is $250 per month. Remember, this is an example. I don't know what Microsoft charges you for Windows. And then I have defined that there's an SLA cost, which is 100, 200, or 400 US dollars, depending on what's the SLA, low, medium, or high. Now we will go to cost management and start entering this into a cost model. Here we are in cost management. I will go to the settings page, and I will say, let's create a cost model. This is, let's say, this demo. And I'm going to say that this, well, I have AWS, GCP, and Azure cost models. That will be for another video. Let's talk about OpenShift cost models today. And I'm going to say that this is US dollars, but we support multiple currencies. Now on the prices creation page, I will create a new rate. So the first thing I said that I was going to add a cost per cluster, which is kind of an average. So I'm going to say that this is cluster cost. It's an infra cost that I made 10,000. I have created my first rate. Then my second rate was going to be a CPU. I'm going to measure based on the effective usage. Let's say this compute cost. This again an infra cost. I'm going to say it's 0.08. Another one is the memory cost. Again, effective. Again, infra cost. I'm going to say this is the same price, could be different, probably. I will now create my GPU cost. This is for an NVIDIA A100. I'm going to say that it's $500. That's my inference cost, inference compute. Then the next thing was the storage cost, which was going to be $80 per requested gigabyte. And then I had the cost of the OpenShift subscriptions, which I said was going to be a supplementary cost, and I was going to parameterize that depending on the Kubernetes IO node role. It's going to be for a master node, it's going to be 0, we don't charge for those. And then for a worker node, it was going to be $50. And then I create this rate again, and I will keep creating more rates. Next is what there was the cost of operation, which was $70 per node. The cost per node month, supplementary cost 70. And then there was the guest operating system subscription, which was going to be again parameterized depending on what supplementary cost depending on the guest OS tag, which if it's Windows, it's going to be 250. And otherwise, I'm going to make that the default. It's going to be 0 for RHEL because for RHEL environmental, so far we don't charge. And then finally, there was the cost of the SLA, which we said it was going to be, assuming that I give one project per customer, internal or external, was going to be a tag cost, which was going to be supplementary SLA low 100. If it's medium, it's going to be 200. If it's high, it's going to be 400. I don't need to set a default, but it's convenient. So I'm going to say that by default, I'm going to charge them for the medium. Now, all of this is my cost model, and I didn't even exhaust all the possibilities that I have in the cost models. Next step is whether I want to add a markup or discount. It's very common that if you have to pay for your own IT department, you add a 20% markup, something like this, to pay for yourself. 20, 30% is a very common value. Then you can choose to distribute based on CPU or memory and whether you want to distribute the overheads. There's the cost of the control plane plus any cross services. That's the work allocated capacity that's there sitting for disaster recovery, for future growth. For some reason, it's there, right? And someone has to pay for it. Then there's the network traffic that we cannot attribute to any workload. Maybe it was control plane traffic. And then there's the storage untreated. That's, for instance, if you have a 30 gigabyte PV and the PVC inside of that is 20 gigabytes, well, someone has to pay for those 10 gigabytes. It could be as well whoever took the 20 gigabyte PVC. And then there's, in the rare case that there will be any GPU unallocated capacity, those users who used some GPU during that month, they will swallow the cost of the remainder capacity in a fair way. We always distribute overhead in a fair way. You use 7% of the capacity of the cluster or the node, you pay for 7% of the overhead of that node or cluster. Finally, you assign this cost model to one cluster or more than one cluster. You can reuse the cost models. And here I see the details. This is my cost model. These are my cost distribution strategies, my markup or discount, and I have assigned it to this cluster. When I create now the cost model, cost manager will start calculating prices, and then those prices will show here. If I go to the cluster, to that MBU cluster in a few minutes, it will show the costs according to the cost model that it has created. I hope you have enjoyed this video. It was long, but I feel like it was a necessary explanation of our cost management capabilities. Thank you, and hope you enjoy cost management.